All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the series of the Republic Commando tutorial series that I got going on. Here we are getting ready to do the helmet. And we're going to be kind of going over, first off, the materials that you're going to need. First off, you're going to need a helmet itself. As in the last video, in the intro video, this is a resin cast from Wicked Armor. And we got these lovely cutouts here that make it really, really easy to clean up. We got this seam up top here that goes down kind of to the bottom neck there. It's very lightweight, very easy cleanup ahead of us. And then we also have these little greeblies here that come with the helmet kit. Those are going to be installed later on. We have this little chin slash vocoder thing there and two rubber rings that go in the aerator vents. We also have, separate from the kit itself, we have the visor kit that I also mentioned in the intro. This is a mirrored and non-mirrored visor. The non-mirrored one having this LED strip and LED for the flashlight. You will need a battery pack for this when you ultimately finish this, but that's something to keep in mind. Now we're going to go over materials. You're going to need sandpaper. I've got some 150 here, as well as some 120 and 220 as well. That'll be just good to have for the seam cleanup, as well as just general sanding for adhesion. You're going to need some files. I've got a rasp and a small flat file here that you're going to need for cleanup of the visor and the vents. I don't use this, but it's good to have some Bondo spot putty, specifically grade 2. And then we have our paints, which for the Night Ops RC paint job we're going for, we're starting off with, of course, with our basic gray and white primers. Those are going to be kind of the basic for just any RC in general. And then we have our Night Ops specific paints, which are going to be including Montana's Gravel right there and Stealth. And then also for some of the other details, we're going to also have some black paint. You can use Montana, you can just use Rust-Oleum. They work pretty well with one another. Doesn't really matter. And then you're going to need some sort of mesh material. This is specifically for the vent cutouts on the sides. And I like using this computer fan mesh. Honestly, you can get this stuff pretty cheap for quite a good amount. This will last you a long time. And then the last thing you're going to need is some sort of gaffer tape. You can use duct tape, but I like the gaffer tape a little bit better. This is for the visor installation. There's an important reason why we're having this, so that'll be something to keep in mind. But let's go ahead and get started on the post-processing and then eventually the paint job. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so first we're going to go ahead and start by cleaning up the helmet, visor, and vent areas. And we're just taking the rasp and kind of just knocking down some of the uneven edges of the visor itself. Nothing too crazy. It really does not take that much time at all. I don't know what kind of resin this is casted in, but it really takes to cleaning up these edges really well with the file. It does not take that much time at all, especially since given how clean the helmet is overall. It's just a really, really nice setup. And yeah, just getting all the burrs, all the edges. And then once that's done, we're going to move right into taking care of this seam. We're going to start with 120. And even though this is sped up to 2 times, it really does not take that much time at all. I think tops, the entire seam cleanup took me about like 10 minutes in total. Really not that much time. So yeah, just taking the 120 grit sandpaper and really just knocking down that edge, making sure that it's all smooth. Then we move on to the neck, the back of the helmet, and extend our way down the neck. Then once we got kind of the back of the helmet sorted, which as you can see, pretty smooth, we then got the neck opening itself that we're just going to clean up a little bit. There's a little bit of uneven edges that are left over from the casting process that we just want to clean up. It also allows us to get a nice rounded transition such that we don't have any sharp edges that to catch our ears or any part of our head on it when we put the helmet on, and it just makes it look nicer overall. Okay, and after all that, so we have now 220 grit sandpaper. I know I made the jump actually from 120 to 220. You can do 150 in between if you really wanted to, if you really wanted to have that nice smooth transition between the grits, but at this point it doesn't really matter because what we're doing is we're essentially just going over the areas that we had scuffed up with the 120 with the 220, and because this helmet is getting weathered later on, I'm not too terribly concerned with how pristine it actually looks. This is such a clean helmet anyways that I'm not too worried about it. Once you're done sanding, you're going to want to go ahead and dust this off and it'll be ready for paint. Okay, so for paint, we're going to go ahead and get started by painting both the helmet and the chin greebly with the Rust-Oleum flat primer. It doesn't really matter what primer you use. You can use Rust-Oleum, Montana, kind of really whatever you have access to. I've used Rust-Oleum primers for long enough that I'm not too terribly concerned. We're just hitting the chin greebly here with a couple of light sprays. And then we're going on to the helmet. As you notice, I'm holding the can for about a foot away, give or take, doing light passes. And we really want kind of just nice, even coverage as much as possible. You could use the white primer if you're doing a white base in particular as a base first, if you really wanted to, but the reason I don't in this case is because we're actually going to mist the white in a few different layers, letting a little bit of that gray layer show through. It helps with the weathering aesthetic later on. Again, going kind of slow and showing nice even coverage overall. And once that's all done, you're going to let that sit and dry, and then we'll throw on the white here in just a moment for you all. Okay, so we have now the white, and I sped up this application, but it's the same principle as the gray, kind of just misting it on, light coats, about 12 or so inches away, 12 to 16 kind of deal. A little bit further back just because I am doing thinner layers on this particular one because like I said for the gray application, I do want a bit of that gray to show through the white. And just getting nice even coverage overall, just to make sure that, there's no drips, not going too heavy. And it's gonna end up looking really, really nice in the end. And then while we're at it, we're gonna go ahead and spray the little chin greebly or the vocoder with some of the Montana Stealth. This is a really nice color or gray tone for this vocoder. If you want, you can use a different gray, kind of a light charcoal or something like that, but this works great for this particular piece and looks the part very well. Alrighty, and after we have the helmet all painted and of course sufficiently dried, usually about a day, maybe even 2 days depending on humidity and weather and all that, we're ready to tape off the helmet itself. And I have my reference off to the side to kind of give me a guideline as far as where to kind of split the difference on the overall design and everything. This is the only section that remains white on the helmet itself, which is really nice. And what I'm doing is I'm basically taking this tape. Ideally, I want to like use a thinner tape in this case, but this, you know, 1/2-inch tape works well, and really giving me a perimeter layout, and then I can go in with these larger pieces and fill in the gaps that need to be filled in. And you can also see that I've done around the bottom edge as well, because it kind of tapers this white line towards the back of the helmet. There's a little bit of a chin recess underneath that I will show off later. But once it's all ready to go, we're ready to go ahead and start painting. And for speaking of painting, what we're going to start with first is some of the Montana gravel to kind of lay down a base layer of that lighter gray, kind of getting nice even coverage. I do have the stock nozzles on here, so you'll notice that I'm actually getting pretty darn close to the helmet itself, but I'm trying to be very careful not to have any drips. And if a little bit of the white shows through, that's completely fine. And then we follow up this lighter gray immediately with the stealth gray that I mentioned before. And it's pretty much a misting over different areas. And then once this dries, we're going to go into a little bit of black misting, which is going to be comprised of this Rust-Oleum flat primer. And I'm literally just misting on the helmet to get that darkened effect for later weathering. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, once the layers are dry, we're going to begin masking off these areas in the back of the helmet, which are kind of these rectangular shapes that kind of go around the curvature. And these are going to be eventually painted a lighter gray, kind of that primer gray that we used in the very beginning. This feature is pretty much consistent with every Canon Republic Commando helmet. It doesn't really matter the character or skin. It's kind of shown across the board. So kind of masking off this area. It's really nice to have the thinner 1/8 inch tape on hand, but this does in a pinch. And then the other part we're masking off is this piece affectionately known in the RC community as the chocolate bar. It is going to be touched up with the stealth gray that we just painted on this helmet for this particular character. But this is, again, kind of the style that we're going for. And once you have that all taped off sufficiently enough, go ahead and spray that with the light gray. In this case, like I said, I'm using the primer gray that we used to prime this helmet in the very beginning, and then hitting it with that stealth or whatever dark gray you have for this setup. All right, and the last thing that we get to tape off in this case, after the paint dries of the gray and the chocolate bar in the back, is we're taping off this section to be able to do a black border trim that will flank the light gray. And as you can see, I've also done the recesses in the cheeks. These are also painted flat gray. Again, making use of this 1/2 inch tape. It's really easy to, it's much easier to do this kind of setup with the 1/8 inch tape. But you kind of just go slow. You tear off little pieces at a time to create that curvature if this is all you have, which is totally understandable. And then you kind of continue to mask off the other areas. Now, this is not, the black in the cheeks is kind of design specific to the Night Ops, but the black in the back is more specific to, it's more generalized to every clone that has this detail. And we're kind of going around the ear caps very carefully. If you need a pair of tweezers to kind of fill in that void, that's totally fine, but that area gets painted black. And then we kind of follow this general line. It's a little hard to make out, but if you need to pencil this in, that's totally fine. You kind of follow this curvature around with little pieces of tape if need be at a time. And the idea is that you follow this ridge all the way to the dome of the helmet. And it's that little recess in between the dome and the ear and then around the back of the helmet that gets painted. And then we mask off this back, this design, because this part isn't painted black for the entire setup. Once you have all this masked off, you go ahead and mask off the rest of your helmet, ready for paint. Of which we will go ahead and hit again with the flat black, hitting the cheeks, doing a few layers there, and hitting all of this helmet all the way around its circumference. And once this is all done, let it dry, and then we will do the fun part of peeling off the tape. Alrighty, folks, I hope you all enjoyed that sultry peeling of the tape job there we did. The helmet turned out fantastic, but we do have some painted details that we're going to take care of. First off, this mouth section. And quite honestly, all I'm doing is using some black acrylic paint. This is actually black leather acrylic paint from Angelus Direct that I have a bunch on hand and everything. And so it goes on very smooth. Very few brush lines and brush strokes and everything. And I'm kind of just taking it slow and going in all the cracks and crevices and details and really making sure that you got a good amount of coverage in this mouth area. It's honestly a little bit better if I had, a better brush, honestly, but it gets the job done with this craft brush. And what's really nice is that you can wipe off this paint fairly easily if you make a mistake or if something happens, if there's any paint spread, etc., etc. This next part, which I've sped up a little bit, is painting this trapezoidal area with, again, some black paint. This is actually a detail that is extended from the back of the vocoder, or at least what the vocoder will go on top of. And I'm kind of just following the creases and the edges there. Not the whole thing, it's literally just that surface that gets painted black. And then right after that, we're going to go into the detail of the cell shading on the helmet itself. And we're going to start by filling in all of these lines. And I keep a paper towel kind of handy close by so that we can wipe off any of the paint that gets onto the panels themselves. Again, it would be helpful if I had a very nice detail brush, but I don't at this point. And it's just very nice to kind of fill in those gaps where applicable. And then we also have these detail recesses, these grills in the sides of the helmet leading into the ear cap and also on the cheek that get painted. This is one of those things that, even though I have it sped up, you go slow, you take your time, and you really kind of just go with the flow of it and everything. Work section by section, especially if you don't have a proper brush to do the job, like I said. And then we go ahead and paint the recess of the grills here. It's a little bit hard to do this at an angle, but if you're painting it face on, it's not that, much of a problem kind of thing. And then these little extensions of the mouth will get painted as well. We also have this line right here on the ear cap itself, or at least the bottom of the ear cap mount. And then we start doing the cells, or at least the line work on the back of the helmet. Kind of filling in all of those details. And pretty much this is the job. I even did the lines up at the top there. and little dots in front extended around. It's just a nice piece of detail that ties the helmet in together. All right, and lastly, we have some details that we need to add to the helmet itself. And it's going to be these little greebly bits that I've talked about for so long. First off, these little rubber gaskets get glued in. I guess these are kind of their version of the aerators. But those get glued in like so. One right after the other. There is a little bit of a detail bit from the manufacturing of these rings that I keep on the inside just so that the front part is totally flat and nice. And then I hit these, follow this up with a little bit of accelerator, and that cures pretty much instantly after that. Next we have the vocoder, which we will glue in place. Now, what you should do is you should just go ahead and glue it in place and then hit it with accelerator. I didn't do that, and I kind of had a problem with the whole setup. I was also checking off on my references to make sure I had the orientation right. It should be an upside down U when you're looking at the helmet face on. But yeah, do as I say, not as I do. Because the vocoder ended up being just a little crooked, but it should totally be fine. The last little bit of detailing that we're going to do of the painted details is this little recess in the vocoder. It's this small oval shape sitting right in the middle that just gets painted black. And then you wipe off any excess as necessary. You let that dry and you're pretty much good to go. And the last portion that we have going on here is that we're going to go ahead and clear coat the helmet itself. We really want to seal in this paint job for two reasons. One, it'll keep the paint, but two, more importantly, is when we weather this helmet later on in the weathering tutorial, we'll just make sure that the paint underneath doesn't smear or go away kind of deal, because we'll be using a series of washes that would affect the paint. But aside from that, the helmet is done. All right, ladies and gentlemen, moving right along. This is one of the elements about making a Republic Commando that is perhaps one of the most questioned parts of the entire build. This is going to be the tutorial on the visor. Now, this is the visor from Wicked Armor. As mentioned in the intro of the video, as well as this earlier in this video, this is a kit that you can buy. It's got this nice mirrored visor that with a little bit of white etching up at the top. And then we also have this non-mirrored visor, which already has an LED strip over the top, as well as this wire that is already connected to it. The thing that you'll want to note is that you'll want to secure this down pretty tightly. The wires, unfortunately, with my kit came undone, but I do have soldering techniques. If you don't have any soldering experience, it's actually a really easy weld. You just need to strip back the wires enough, heat up the solder, and it should be fine. But I would definitely recommend securing this wire almost immediately as soon as you get the kit itself. If it's too expensive for you, because these kits are expensive, there is a DIY option that I want to briefly go over, in which it will allow you to create your own DIY visor setup. So option one, of course, is the kit. Option two involves basically similar materials. These are welding face shields. If you've been around any kind of trooper cosplay or anything of that measure, or have been around on the forums or whatnot, you will see these all over the place. You can pick these up at Amazon, you can pick these up at a hardware store, automotive stores will also or should have these as well, and it's just a standard welding visor that will have film, protective film on both the front and the back, so it'll actually be a little bit easier to see through. But essentially this would be serving as your base, similar to what we have over on the Wicked kit. And then this is a piece of tinted visor material from Kale Vala Visors. I'm going to have a link for them down in the description below. And this is one of many, many, many colors that they offer. This is specifically their chrome, which is actually part of a Phase 1 helmet that I'm going to be working on off camera for another project. But this is the setup. This is basically mirroring what it is that you're going to be doing with the kit. And then all you need to really get from here is the LED visor, or the LED strip, along with this singular LED setup. And if you're not comfortable splicing the LED into the LED strip like Wicked has, don't even worry about it. You can get single cell batteries, or not single cells, single LEDs with a battery kit that's separate and easier to do. Then you can also use either white paint for doing the striping material, or the stripe setup, or you can use this packing foam that will also do the trick. You'll just need to sandwich it in place. You can hot glue it in, or you can even spray glue it in, which actually probably be cleaner, but you do need to like cut it out in a kind of a jagged formation. It's gonna look pretty similar. It's got a little bit more diffusion than the paint that Wicked uses. I'm actually not even sure what Rob uses over there, but that's the setup. That's ideally what we're going with. So we're going to go ahead and start working on the actual assembly of the visor, and that will be very, very exciting to show off. All right, so off camera, I went ahead and soldered the wires back in place and threw on a battery pack that I had lying around to make sure it works, and it does. And I've also taped up the area to kind of reinforce the wires and make sure that they're not going anyplace. Right now, the visor is in such a way that we're looking as if we're looking through it and outward. And the orientation that we want this to be, because the LED goes on the right side of the helmet, we want to make sure that this visor itself, the mirrored one, is facing away from us. And we want that white to show outward. And so this is the configuration that you're going to want when you are actually sandwiching these two visors together. You're going to take your gaff tape and you're going to go ahead and begin to tape up the ends and make sure that, you know, these are fairly secure. They are essentially going to become one visor. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and carefully bend this part of the LED around. This is not super necessary, but it does help with getting more light through the visor itself. And so you'll want to secure this down with some of your gaff tape while still trying to allow for enough light to show through. I also didn't do this, but it might be nice to clean your visors first if you know you're not going to work on the kit for a bit. This helps with being able to see out of the visors. So I might go back off camera and and clean these up to make sure that these are nice and able to see out of, kind of deal. So now go ahead and take your gaff tape and tape up the edges, starting with the sides first, to really make sure that they're secure. And do a little test bend to make sure that you can bend everything in place once it's inside the helmet. There's a little bit of diffusion here, or a blockage here because of the tape, and that's okay. There's still enough light shining down from the LEDs, and that is what you want. This is the effect that we're going for. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and tape up the top of the visor itself. And the reason we're doing this is because of light physics. The light is shining back in our face at the moment. If we don't tape this up, it will illuminate our face from inside the helmet, and it will be very obvious to other people on the outside. So this is in part not only securing the top of the helmet, this is also deflecting and reflecting the light back towards the outside. It's kind of this fun physics light play of taping up in the back of the visor as much as possible with, not obstructing your vision at all, but at the same time you need to make sure that the light itself is reflected outward and not back at you. We're going to go ahead and then tape up these remaining smaller bits on the sides. Just be careful not to overlap things too much, otherwise they will show on the visor itself. And then that's pretty much the effects that we're going for. And then if we bring over the helmet itself, this is going to take a little finagling. And of course, trying not to destroy the wires and undo them again. Go ahead and bend this in place, and then we kind of get a rough look. And that is the effect. Now, obviously, you can see my fingers on the inside there, but with a little tape, it'll work out very, very well. I'm very pleased with how this helmet turned out, and it looks very awesome. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, that will conclude the visor and helmet tutorial for this build. I am not installing the visor and flashlight as of yet because I'm going to wait till after the weathering tutorial further down the line. But I'm so pleased with how this turned out. We also will be eventually installing some of this packing foam in the flashlight mounting area because the light bulb is very bright. But I am super pleased and super happy with how this helmet turned out. For next episode, we're going to be working on the arms videos, which is going to be very exciting. And I can't wait to get more into the armor of this series. Again, I hope people have learned something. I hope this tutorial was very informative. Please feel free, of course, to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the algorithms, and hit that bell notification icon as well, because then you'll get updates as to when I post things next. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, and thank you always, and we'll see you next time.